November 13, 2022, the murder count in Jamaica was 1,360. It has since increased, but I point to that date because 2 days later, that increasing number was part of the reason the government declared several states of emergency. The measure is common in recent time, but this time it got a little more attention as there were loud calls for it to be extended beyond the 14 days. Well, that didn't happen. The opposition voted against it in the Senate. But the government, the opposition, the business sector, citizens, why are we so polar on the use of the measure? That's what we're discussing. Welcome to PTN Plus, where we take our primetime news stories further. Now, to help us break it all down, I'm talking with attorney at law Clyde Williams. Clyde, welcome.
Blessed love. Always a pleasure to be on TVJ.
All right, I tell you, all right. First of all, we're looking at the SOEs. The Prime Minister pretty much described a state of anarchy, a state on the brink of anarchy when he was declaring the SOEs. Let's hear what he said, how he described it when he declared it in November.
Criminal networks and the criminal organizations are doing their best to incorporate legitimate persons, legitimate public authority into their criminal actions. In other words, they are trying to corrupt the state. Now, when we start to see criminal organizations operating in that way, then they are beginning to transition out of being criminal operatives to trying to influence government policy and outcome. We have seen states where this has reached the point where either the state is on the brink of collapse or they have had to take extreme actions.
Now, Clyde, that was the Prime Minister saying state on the brink of collapse, comparing it to other countries where crime is out of control. What do you make of that declaration, the reasons he gave?
All right, let me just go back just a little context in terms of Jamaica's story with crime. Let me use a figure in 2006, that's 16 years ago. The reported murders 16 years ago in 2006 was 1340. These figures are from the Economic Social Survey of Jamaica, Planning Institute of Jamaica. Now, so that's 2006. In 2005, it was 1674 reported murders. In 2004, 1471. In 2011, 1133. In 2021, 1463. And we're up past 1360. So I want to say initially that for the last 20 odd years in Jamaica, almost 30 years, we have had abnormal serious crime rates. So I can understand the government wanting to deal with the situation in a manner that is consistent with government policy and the rights of individuals. I also want to say very quickly that we are looking at the manifestations and the symptoms rather than the cause. And that's been a problem in Jamaica. In other words, no boy is born a shutter. No boy is born a criminal. No boy is born a rapist. No boy is born a murderer. I'm using men because 98% of murder, serious crimes, just about 98%, are committed by men. So I want to make an initial point. Nobody is born a murderer, a shutter, a killer, a wicked smutty, a dog-art smutty. So something goes wrong between birth and about mid-teens in Jamaica. Because our data in Jamaica, and I'm using 2021 data from, again, the Economic Social Survey of Jamaica, demonstrates that as early as about mid-teens, just a little 13, 14, boys get involved in killings and in shootings. And the large number of persons arrested for serious crime fall in the age range 25 to 34, that's last year, and 35 to 44. Murders were referring to specifically. The age range 25 to 34, 427 persons were arrested for murder, and the age range 35 to 44, 267. So the point I'm making is that something goes wrong in the process of the boys growing up in the country. So by mid-teens, they become murderers and shutters. By the time they get into their productive years in their 20s, they are full-blown murderers and criminals, shutters. So the question is, what's going wrong? What we are doing in Jamaica for the last 30 years, we are dealing with on the back end. When it's all gone wrong, we're going to arrest, we're going to lock them up, we're going to put them into detention and so forth.
Addressing
So my
the
first
symptoms and not the
point
cause.
is, absolutely. So we have to first investigate what is going on with our boys. No, it's not nature. We know it's not nature. So it's nurture. It's environment. It's socialization. Are there connecting factors? When we look at these numbers, are these boys primarily in a particular neighborhood, in particular communities, the families, the schools they go? So we need to deal with that. I want to use an example of a flood. Now, it no matter how many sandbags you use, at a point in time, if the infrastructure is not sufficient, it is going to flood the place same way. What we've been doing in Jamaica is sandbagging crime, not dealing with the cause. That being
it's interesting that you put it that way, because I think the business sector, and most Jamaicans actually agree with you. But as it relates to the SOEs, the business sector, for example, they pretty much beg the legislators to extend the SOEs. I want to just go here first to hear what the business sector said to the opposition MPs, or rather opposition senators, when it was to go to the Senate for an extension.
We as a business sector in Montego Bay, we have seen the results from our state of public emergency as it relates to reduction in murders and reduction in crime overall. So, and if the armed forces see where it's necessary for that to be in place, we are calling on the opposition to support that.
We are in full support of this measure because we're seeing where it saves lives, we're seeing where our staff is safer going home and coming to work, we're seeing where our tourists are also safer. 26 lives were saved, and mine might have been one of those 26. I know it's a drastic measure, but I think that we're living in drastic times. When we start to approach 1,500 persons that have died in Jamaica by crime, I think we really need all the tools necessary. I think the Jamaica Constabulary Force and the Jamaica Defense Force, their commanders have asked for this tool, and I think it is necessary that we give them the tools to act.
So, Clyde, what they are basically saying, and as I said, several Jamaicans rather, is that the problem, as you pointed out, comes from way deeper than just now. But right now we have a crisis, and so they supported the SOE. What do you say about how the business sector put it across to the opposition?
It's a little bit unfortunate the business sector is only looking at symptoms. In other words, where is the PSOJ and the business sector when the boys are 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, that they need some support? Where are those organizations? We have been dealing with it the way they have suggested for the last 20 years. Let me go back to Suppressions of Crimes Act, 1974. The powers under the Suppressions of Crimes Act are the similar powers that the SOE will give. We had Suppressions of Crimes Act from the mid-1970s till about the mid-1990s. 20 years of the Suppressions of Crimes Act. And in other words, I'm saying the same measures that the private sector is calling for today. We tried those measures for 20 years. Suppression of Crimes Act. And all we saw happening was a continued growth in murders, continued growth in shootings. We created a gun court and it continued spiraling downwards. So I want to say that the analysis is problematic, because what we continue to do is to treat symptoms and we don't treat the illness. So what is happening is that we continue to fight. Remember the figures I gave you a while ago? In 2006, we had 1340. In 2005, we had 1674. In 2004, we had 1471 murder. We have consistently had about 40 murders per 100,000 every year in the country, 40 to 50 per 100,000, consistently in the last 20 to 30 years in the top 3 of murder capitals in the world itself. So those measures have not succeeded. But I also want to quickly say,
as we know, the opposition basically didn't support it because they spoke about the constitutionality of it, persons being locked up for extended periods of time and losing their jobs, not being able to see their family and things like this. So they had one view of why they did not want to support it. But I want to move past the opposition now. Basically, what they have said and what you're saying, there is a deeper thing that needs to be addressed. Can't they work together in that we have the state of emergency to arrest what's happening now and get something to deal with the issues behind that have been festering for decades, as you put it?
I accept that analysis that we must deal with the current situation. In other words, we must save lives currently. And also while we deal with the root, but what I'm suggesting is that because we have been locked into a cycle of saving lives currently, we have not dealt with the problems historically. The PSOJ figures are also wrong. The states of emergencies do not cause crime reduction in the entire country. In fact, in the period 2011 to 2015, the crime numbers, the murder numbers were significantly less than the period 2018 to 2022 when we have had several states of emergency. I want to just correct the data that at the end of the year, the crime figures on murder and guns shooting are higher in the period 2018 to 2022 and 2011 to 2015. So the net effect of the states of emergency is to reduce crime in a locale, but it shifts somewhere else in the country. But I want to talk about the constitutionality as well, because it seems as if everybody's forgetting there's a constitution. I will say this, Herman, I do have a slight difference of opinion on the PNP's position, the opposition's position. And the position is this. It is both the opposition and the government are divided on the meaning to give to a particular provision in the Charter of Rights, as in the provision that triggers a state of public emergency. There are three circumstances in which you can have that in Jamaica. Jamaica is at war, one, that's one circumstance. Two, where the parliament votes 2/3 in each house to say that our democratic institutions are under siege. And the final way you can get it is when the Governor General makes a proclamation. That has been the problem in the country. Now, the opposition is of the view that the criteria set out in the Charter is not met with these states of emergency being declared by the Prime Minister. The government has a different view. My position is this. Since it is not the business of the opposition to interpret the Constitution, I want to be very clear. It is not the business of the Parliament. Parliament makes laws. It is the courts that interpret and give meaning to laws. So the division of opinion between the opposition and the government as to what should trigger the question, what should trigger the proclamation for the state of emergency, there's a division. The only institution that can resolve that is the court. So my position is simply this. Because it's a collision of governance and the government is charged to govern, and because the opposition has a view, it is only an opinion. So I disagree when the opinion says that they are protecting the constitutional rights of Jamaica. That's not for the opposition, that's for the courts. The opposition may have a view about the certain provisions, what it must do in this situation. My view is that it must yield to the government.
So you believe they should have given that one vote and allow it to be extended?
That's right. And I say this because the government says their interpretation of the provisions allow them to call it. And they are the government, one government at a time. The opposition says we disagree. No, there's a deadlock. The opposition cannot use its authority to determine the deadlock must be resolved in their way. That's wrong. The only person, the only institution to resolve that deadlock is the court. So what I think the opposition need to do is to use the one vote and leverage for improved conditions. Use the vote and leverage for a panel of lawyers being available once there's a declaration in a particular area. Use the vote and leverage for the panel that is to examine the circumstances. Remember, there's a tribunal that the law says must be set up immediately once there's a declaration. So my short point on the opposition's position, and I'm not saying they're wrong, I'm just saying my judgment is different.
Going forward though, now that it has not been extended, and basically the opposition is saying, hey, declare another one if you see it so needed. What do you think should be done from the government side? Oh, by the way, of course, the private sector, the public is calling on both of them to come together on a consensus and get something done. What would you want to see now from them in terms of addressing the root problem and addressing the murder rate right now? What do you suggest?
Absolutely. I want to see a change in attitude and values. In other words, an approach and manner. The government is aware of the problems the opposition is having with it and the difference of opinion. The government must lead. It must meet with the opposition and seek to meet those concerns. I'm very disappointed that in the 4 years of calling the states of emergency, the government is yet to meet with the opposition and genuinely tackle their concerns. What the government has been doing is declare it and say, well, if you vote against it, you vote against it, but may I declare it. We cannot continue to operate like that. No country can continue to operate this way. So the government must meet with the opposition. The opposition must also, I think, in my own position, yield a little bit in terms of the policy position. By that, I'm saying to the opposition, listen, we understand your position. You can use your majority to convey your position. Give the government the one vote, but use the vote to improve the conditions, to address the concerns you have as the opposition. So immediately, I would say the government and the opposition need to tone down the rhetoric. I was very disappointed. The government needs one vote from the opposition, but they went out swinging and saying the opposition was harboring criminals, friendly to criminals. No, you're not going to get a vote like that. You need one vote and you come out cussing me and saying I'm in bed with criminals. You're not going to get that vote. So for me at home, I thought the government was involved in a kind of game, you know, because you need the vote, but you come out and you pretty much block them voting for you by your position. Secondly, I think the opposition must also tone down the rhetoric a little bit. And the opposition must be very aware that they have not done much better historically at managing the situation. The 1674 murders reported in 2005 was during the height of the PNP government. In fact, during those years, 2005, 2006, 2007, 2008, 9, murder was on rampage in the country. The numbers are exceedingly high. So I want to say to the opposition, you need to step down a little bit from your high horse because you have not managed the situation much better. In fact, it was under the PNP administration that the murder shot up over 1,000 and went up to near 1,700 at one time. So the point I'm making, humble yourself, back off a little bit. Thirdly, the opposition need to put concrete proposals on the table. And I want to put in some proposals myself. Now, one of the tools being used in the SOE is curfews and searches and so on. You can do that without the SOE. You don't need the state of emergency. What you need is special legislation to deal with that. There is also a place for what is called preventive detention. The Constitution, the Charter allows for preventive detention. And you know what it says? It says to stop people from committing crime. So I understand the significance of that. The government says, the police says, listen, when a crime is committed within 72 hours, if you don't get in there and get the thing done, we're going to lose all the evidence. So preventive detention is important. So what I'm making a recommendation is that the government must put a piece of legislation in the New Bail Act. They need to have one chapter in the New Bail Act to deal with preventive detention, because that particular chapter has to be carved out and crafted in a way to meet the constitutional test of reasonable, demonstrable in a justified society and so forth. I believe if it's done properly, we can meet that test.
You're saying that both political parties need to take the politics out of it, basically, and work together, which is what the society on a whole has been calling for over the years.
Yes.
And you're saying putting in preventative measures, focus on those in terms of dealing with the crime as it is now and getting back to what has been festering for years. We have to wrap it up right there, Clive. As usual, we are thankful for your opinion and your views on this. Of course, SOEs and crime are a burning issue in Jamaica, especially heading now into the Christmas season where crime normally peaks, or rather picks up. That's it for PTN Plus this week, guys. Thank you so much for watching and pleasant day.